I can actually hear you shuffling your stack of paper notes over there, getting everything perfectly organized.
Oh yeah, I've got the research right here in front of me. All the numbers are ready to be dissected.
Perfect. And I have to say, the visual setup you have going on today is incredible. For those of you listening, the backdrop over there is this sprawling, illuminated cityscape at night. I'm guessing that's not just for aesthetics.
No, not at all. It's meant to represent the massive interconnected grid of the global labor market.
Right.
Millions of lights, millions of jobs, all reacting to the exact same massive technological shift we're about to discuss today.
Exactly. Because I have a very important question for you listening right now. Are you constantly hearing that artificial intelligence is coming for everyone's jobs? But then you look around your office or your neighborhood and you find yourself wondering, where is all this actually happening?
Yeah, it's a huge disconnect.
Right. We've been hearing the alarm bells for years now.
Yeah.
But the actual visible impact on the ground seems incredibly hard to spot.
It really has become the defining anxiety of the modern workplace. I mean, everyone feels the ground shifting under their feet, but nobody knows exactly where the economic cracks are going to appear first or how wide they're going to be.
And that brings us to our specific mission today. This deep dive is exploring a brand new, hot-off-the-presses research paper from Anthropic. It was just published 2 days ago on March 5, 2026.
Fresh data.
Very fresh. The title is Labor Market Impacts of AI, a New Measure and Early Evidence. And our goal here isn't to make wild sci-fi predictions about a robot takeover. Instead, we're looking at a brand new analytical framework designed to measure the actual data.
Right, because we want to figure out exactly how to track AI's impact on your career and your industry right now.
Before a massive economic disruption hits.
Exactly. The intention here is to establish a rigorous baseline. We need to know what reality looks like today using empirical evidence so we can accurately measure the velocity of the changes coming tomorrow.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the Luthers start their paper with a heavy dose of what they call humility, which I deeply appreciate.
It's very necessary in economics.
Oh, absolutely. They point out that economists and forecasters have a pretty spotty track record when it comes to predicting massive labor market shifts. The sources we're looking at detail several past failed economic predictions. For instance, think back to the 2009 panic over job offshoreability.
Oh, yeah. The fear at that time was palpable. I mean, the forecasts were incredibly dire.
Forecasters looked at the landscape and identified roughly a quarter of all U.S. jobs as completely vulnerable to being offshored to other countries. But a decade later, the data showed something entirely different.
The exact opposite in some cases.
Yeah, most of those supposedly vulnerable jobs actually maintained healthy employment growth.
Yeah.
And we also have the endless debates over the China trade shock, or the exact employment effects of introducing industrial robots to factory floors. Even looking backward with perfect hindsight, experts still argue over what actually happened in the data.
The government's own occupational growth forecasts have historically struggled to do much more than just, draw a straight line from past trends.
Which perfectly illustrates why measuring the impact of artificial intelligence is so exceptionally difficult.
Measuring AI isn't like measuring the sudden, violent economic shock of something like the COVID-19 pandemic. When the pandemic lockdowns hit, unemployment skyrocketed essentially overnight. The cause and effect were immediate, physical, and undeniable.
You didn't need a sophisticated statistical model to tell you why restaurants and airlines were shedding millions of jobs in April of 2020.
Right. It was right there in front of us.
The doors were locked.
Literally locked.
Oh, yeah.
But AI operates differently. It is a slow burn. It's what economists call a general-purpose technology, and it seeps into the economy task by task, workflow by workflow. It is much more analogous to the gradual rollout of the internet or electricity.
It weaves its way into an industry and fundamentally changes how things are done.
Yeah. Yes, but it doesn't always result in an immediate pink slip for the worker. The effects can easily be clouded by normal business cycles, changing trade policies, or shifts in consumer demand. And that is the fundamental why behind this new paper. We desperately need a new tool to actually capture what is happening right now in this ambiguous transitional phase.
Which brings us to the core of this research. They have built that new tool, and they call it observed exposure.
Yes.
Before we get into the results, though, we need to understand how this machine actually works.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the traditional way to measure if a job was vulnerable to AI was purely theoretical. Researchers would look at a job description and say, well, a language model could theoretically write this email or analyze this spreadsheet.
Just guessing based on capabilities.
Exactly. But this new framework from Anthropic is much more rigorous. It combines 3 distinct pillars. First, it uses the ONET database. For those unfamiliar, ONET is a massive, incredibly detailed database sponsored by the U.S. Department of Labor.
It meticulously breaks down the specific day-to-day tasks associated with about 800 different U.S. occupations.
Right. It treats jobs not as a single title, but as a bundle of distinct tasks.
Okay, so pillar 1 is the map of human tasks. What's the second pillar?
The second pillar is the theoretical capability of large language models. This is an assessment of what the models are technically capable of doing today based on their training and architecture. But the third pillar is where the magic happens. They combine those first two with actual real-world usage data from the Anthropic Economic Index.
Wait, before we move on, let's clarify that third pillar for the listener. What exactly is the Anthropic Economic Index? Are they just counting how many times a user types a prompt into Claude?
No, it is much more sophisticated than just counting prompts. The index aggregates anonymized large-scale usage patterns and maps those specific real-world interactions back to the standardized tasks in the ONET database.
Okay.
It isn't just looking at how much people use the AI, it is categorizing what economic tasks they're actually using it to accomplish in their daily workflows.
And that third piece creates the big aha moment for this deep dive. Because the data reveals a massive gap between what AI can theoretically do and what it is actually doing in the real world right now.
To use a tangible analogy, it is the difference between having a sports car with an engine that can easily hit 200 miles an hour and the reality of actually driving that car during your morning commute.
Traffic is always a factor.
Exactly. The mechanical capability is absolutely there, but the surrounding environment, the traffic, the speed limits, the road conditions, it doesn't permit you to use it.
I hear you on the sports car analogy, but to play devil's advocate here, if the AI can do the work, why aren't companies forcing it through to save money right now? What's actually stopping them?
That's a great question.
Because the paper uses a highly specific example about authorizing drug refills. According to the theoretical capability models, an AI is fully capable of authorizing drug refills and providing prescription information to pharmacies. The LLM can easily parse the text and make the correct determination.
It has the reasoning skills.
Right. But the real-world usage data shows essentially nobody is letting an AI do that.
That's right.
Why the holdup if the technology is ready?
Because the capability exists in a vacuum, but businesses operate in reality. In the pharmacy example, you have strict legal constraints and liability issues. You have specific, often outdated legacy software systems that don't easily integrate with a modern API.
Oh, those legacy systems are everywhere.
And most importantly, you have mandatory human-in-the-loop verification steps. Healthcare is highly regulated. You cannot simply plug a language model into a pharmacy database and let it run wild dispensing medication, regardless of how intelligent the model is. The institutional friction slows down the theoretical capability.
So even though the task of authorizing a refill is theoretically exposed to automation, the observed exposure in the real world is essentially zero right now.
Zero.
But the researchers highlight a fascinating statistic to balance this out. They found that 97% of the observed real-world usage of Claude falls into categories that researchers previously deemed theoretically feasible, so the theoretical models aren't hallucinating.
No, they're not. They are highly accurate about the types of work AI can do.
The capability aligns almost perfectly with the use cases, but the overall volume, the actual depth of that real-world deployment across the economy is still just a fraction of what is possible.
The AI is playing in the correct sandbox, but it hasn't built the entire castle yet. It is doing the right tasks, just not at the maximum theoretical scale.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's talk about exactly whose jobs are in that sandbox, based on this new metric of actual, observed, real-world exposure, who sits at the absolute top of the vulnerability list.
The empirical data leaves little room for debate here. The most highly exposed profession by a very wide margin is computer programmers. According to the observed usage data, 75% of their daily tasks have coverage.
75%.
Yes. Following closely behind them are customer service representatives and data entry keyers, both sitting at 67% coverage.
When you break down the nature of those jobs, it tracks perfectly. Synthesizing large amounts of text, standardizing formats, generating lines of code, parsing documents to answer first-line customer inquiries. That is the exact bread and butter of what these language models excel at today. It is entirely cognitive, screen-based work.
Precisely.
But let's look at the other end of the spectrum to provide some contrast. Who has zero exposure?
Roughly 30% of the workforce falls into the category of having absolutely zero AI coverage. We're talking about roles like cooks, motorcycle mechanics, lifeguards, bartenders, dishwashers, and dressing room attendants.
Roles that require a body in a physical space.
Exactly. AI struggles profoundly with unstructured physical environments. The physical world remains a strictly human domain.
That physical versus digital divide makes intuitive sense. But even within the digital domain, the paper reveals some huge surprises.
The most fascinating gap in the data is found within the computer and math occupational category. If you look purely at the theoretical exposure models, a staggering 94% of their daily tasks are deemed vulnerable to AI.
94%.
But when this new framework measures actual observed real-world usage today, only 33% of those tasks are currently covered.
That is a massive delta between the potential disruption and the current reality. Over 60% of their tasks are theoretically vulnerable, but completely untouched in practice. Why such a stark difference for math and computer professionals? Is the AI just struggling with complex mathematics?
It is less about the model's raw mathematical ability and more about the complexity of the workflow. Generating a discrete block of code is relatively straightforward for an AI, but complex mathematical modeling or systems architecture often requires deep contextual business logic.
You mean things that aren't just in a simple text prompt?
Exactly. Proprietary offline datasets and cross-departmental coordination that an AI simply doesn't have access to yet. The tasks are interconnected in ways that are hard to automate piece by piece.
That context is crucial. Now, listener, I want you to mentally throw out your assumptions about who is most at risk from automation. Historically, when we talk about machines taking jobs, we picture the 1980s. We picture robotic arms replacing blue-collar workers on an automotive factory floor.
That's the classic mental model.
But this paper uses the current population survey as a baseline to look at the demographics of the exposed workers. And just to be clear, the current population survey is the joint effort by the U.S. Census Bureau and the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It is the gold standard for labor force data.
The best we have.
The researchers specifically looked at the window from August to October 2022, right before ChatGPT launched, to get a clean before picture. And the demographics of the most highly exposed workers flipped the historical script entirely.
The demographic profile is the exact inverse of historical automation trends.
I'm going to let you read these statistics because they are staggering. Who exactly makes up this highly exposed group?
The workers in the most highly exposed top quartile are actually older than the unexposed group. They are 16 percentage points more likely to be female, they are 11 percentage points more likely to be white, and nearly twice as likely to be Asian compared to the workers with zero exposure.
And the financial disparity is significant too.
Gary, the highly exposed group earns 47% more on average.
So we are talking about older, highly paid professionals.
Yeah.
And I imagine their education levels reflect that income gap.
Drastically. In the unexposed group, the mechanics and the cooks, just 4.5% of workers hold graduate degrees. But in the most highly exposed group, 17.4% hold graduate degrees. It is almost a fourfold difference.
This completely changes the narrative. AI isn't coming for routine physical labor. It is squarely aiming at highly educated, highly compensated, white-collar knowledge work.
Which brings a whole new level of macroeconomic urgency to the conversation. When automation displaces lower-income workers, it is a tragedy for those individuals. But when automation hits the highest income earners, the people driving massive amounts of consumer spending, real estate markets, and tax revenues, the economic ripple effects across the entire country can be incredibly profound.
So what does this all mean? We know exactly who is in the crosshairs. Highly paid programmers, customer service reps, and data analysts with master's degrees. The models can do their cognitive tasks, and the Anthropic Economic Index proves the models are actively being used to do those tasks right now.
Right.
So where is the bloodbath? Are the mass layoffs happening?
This is where we have to ground the conversation in hard empirical data, specifically unemployment data. The researchers prioritize unemployment figures over other metrics because unemployment represents actual, tangible economic harm.
As opposed to just looking at job postings.
Exactly. Job postings can be incredibly noisy. A company might consolidate 3 open roles into one or change the job titles entirely, making the data look like a contraction when it isn't. But unemployment means a worker actively wants a job, is looking for one, and cannot find one. It is the clearest signal of distress.
And what is the verdict when they run the numbers?
The verdict is that as of this paper's publication in March 2026, they find absolutely no systematic increase in unemployment for these highly exposed workers since late 2022.
None.
None. When you chart the unemployment trends of the highly exposed white-collar workers against the unexposed physical world workers, the trend lines since the launch of ChatGPT are practically identical. The massive displacement simply isn't showing up in the aggregate numbers.
Wait, let me stop you there. A skeptical listener might be thinking, maybe this new observed exposure tool is just broken. Maybe it's too blunt of an instrument to pick up the nuanced job losses happening in corporate America. How do we know the alarm system even works?
It is a valid concern, but the researchers stress-tested the framework specifically for that. This isn't a faulty instrument. The model they built is highly sensitive. To give you some context, during the Great Recession from 2007 to 2009, unemployment rates basically doubled nationwide, going from roughly 5% to 10%.
Right.
If we were currently experiencing a Great Recession for white-collar workers, for example, if unemployment in this top quartile of highly exposed jobs doubled from its current 3% up to 6%, this model would spot it instantly. In fact, the math shows it could detect even a 1 percentage point differential between the exposed and unexposed groups.
So the alarm system is fully operational, it's plugged in, it's highly sensitive, the sensors are all green, and it's just not ringing. The mass unemployment event for highly exposed jobs simply isn't happening yet.
However, there is a blinking yellow light on the dashboard that requires our attention.
A canary in the coal mine.
What's fascinating here is that when you dig underneath those aggregate unemployment numbers, you find one specific demographic subset where the data is behaving very differently, and that is young workers.
Specifically, the 22 to 25 age group, the recent college grads, the entry-level applicants trying to get their foot in the door.
Exactly. Now, to be precise, overall unemployment for this young demographic is actually flat. They aren't filing for unemployment benefits in massive droves. But the crucial metric the researchers isolated here is new job starts. This measures the rate at which these young workers are actually successfully landing and beginning a new role.
Let me make sure I'm translating this to everyday reality correctly. So essentially, the 35-year-old senior data analyst isn't getting fired. They're keeping their job. But the company also isn't hiring the fresh 22-year-old college grad to fetch and clean that analyst's data anymore, because the senior analyst is just using Claude to do it themselves.
That perfectly encapsulates what the data suggests is happening. Starting in 2024, there is a clear, measurable divergence. The job-finding rate for young workers who are trying to enter highly exposed occupations, those coding, data entry, and analytical jobs, has dropped. It has fallen by about 0.5 percentage point per month. And when you compound that over time, it results in a 14% drop in the job-finding rate post-ChatGPT compared to the 2022 baseline.
A 14% drop is massive for a specific cohort. And just to isolate the variable, how do older workers in those exact same exposed fields look?
That is the most telling part. Workers older than 25 show absolutely no such decrease in their job-finding rates within these exact same professions. This friction, this closing of the door, is entirely isolated to the youngest cohort trying to break into the most exposed field.
Which opens up a massive debate about the why. Why is this only hitting the 22 to 25-year-olds? The scenario we just discussed, a covert corporate hiring slowdown where a company simply frees junior headcount, seems the most obvious.
Yeah.
But we have to look at this from multiple angles. What else could be driving a 14% drop in new job starts without spiking the unemployment rate?
This is an open, critical thinking question. It might not be solely a corporate hiring freeze. These young workers are highly educated and adaptable. Are they looking at the landscape, seeing the AI exposure in their chosen field, and actively deciding to pivot?
That makes sense.
They might be taking different, less exposed jobs instead, perhaps roles requiring more complex human interaction. Alternatively, they might be opting to stay in school longer to pursue a master's degree, hoping to skip the entry-level bottleneck entirely.
I see the logic there. If you just graduated with a degree that leads straight to a highly exposed administrative job, you might decide to pivot into sales or physical engineering. You aren't showing up as unemployed in the data because you found work, but you just aren't starting the specific exposed job you originally intended to start.
Precisely. The empirical data clearly shows us that, a 14% drop in new job starts for young people in these specific fields, but the complex behavioral why behind that drop is still unfolding.
This raises an incredibly important question. If we pull all of these different threads together, the O-Net tasks, the demographics, the flat unemployment, the drop in youth hiring are, what is the ultimate takeaway for the listener right now?
To synthesize everything we've covered from this Anthropic research, we are observing a historic technological shift. This new framework proves that AI is heavily, specifically targeting high-paying, highly educated, white-collar tasks.
And the theoretical capability matches the real-world usage.
However, the massive wave of actual displacement, the white-collar unemployment crisis that so many predicted, simply hasn't materialized yet. The major tangible impact we are seeing in the labor market so far is a slight but highly measurable closing of the door for young workers trying to enter these exposed fields.
The authors of the paper even explicitly state that their next critical step for research is studying recent graduates with credentials in these specific, highly exposed areas to see exactly how they are navigating this new reality.
It is undoubtedly the most urgent frontier for labor economists right now.
And building on that urgency, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over as you go about your day. We know AI is getting incredibly good at automating routine, entry-level cognitive tasks. Reading long documents, summarizing data, writing basic boilerplate code, those are the exact tasks that young workers usually perform when they first enter a profession.
It's how they learn the ropes.
Exactly. It's how they understand the business. But if AI successfully automates those entry-level tasks, and the data shows hiring for those 22 to 25-year-olds is already slowing down as a result, how will the next generation ever gain the fundamental hands-on experience required to eventually reach the complex senior-level roles that AI can't do? Are we inadvertently automating away the entire apprenticeship phase of human career growth?
It is a profound structural question for the future of knowledge work. You cannot just spawn a senior software engineer or a veteran financial analyst out of thin air. They have to cut their teeth, make mistakes, and learn the architecture by doing the very tasks we are currently handing over to language models.
If the bottom rung of the corporate ladder is suddenly made of code, how does anyone climb to the top? It's something the labor market is going to have to figure out, and quickly. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. As the world changes and these models get smarter, remember to look past the hype, look at the actual data, and keep questioning everything. We'll catch you on the next one.